if you trust in something greater than yourself, if you let yourself go for one moment, you can feel a bigger power. It is a power of a community for sure, but it's a power of time and space. It's like a power of history. It's a power of future. And it's almost like everything is right here, right now.
Welcome to the Evolutionary Leadership Podcast. My name is Gibrán Rivera, and I'm a facilitator. Here, I am inviting you into a conversation with remarkable leaders who are devoting their lives to the evolution of consciousness and culture. In this episode, I get to interview Colette Pichon Battle. Colette is the executive director of the Gulf Coast Law and Policy Center. But she's so much more than that. Colette is a cultural holder. I experience her as a voice with moral clarity, as a voice that speaks with fierce urgency. And she does this within what feels like a gigantic heart. Colette has a special gift to be in community, to work with people who are being directly impacted by climate change. Here she talks a bit about her experience of Katrina, what that was like and what it was like to be impacted again by the Gulf oil spill in just a few years after that. Colette speaks about what it means to be part of a people who will lose their language and to be of a land that is already being claimed by the rising seas. But she does this with an unfailing sense of hope. Colette has this faith and this practice in helping people come together to heal, to turn towards each other, to listen to their land, to use their collective capacity to face this seemingly insurmountable challenge that is climate change. I think you're going to love this episode. As you know, these are the early days of the Evolutionary Leadership Podcast. Your feedback is invaluable. Let us know what you think and enjoy getting to know Colette. Welcome, Colette.
Thank you for having me.
So glad that you're here. This is very exciting.
Really exciting for me to be here.
I can't believe you made it to my home.
I can't believe it's snowing outside.
All the way from are you living in New Orleans?
I live just outside New Orleans in Slidell, so across the lake.
That's right. And you've mentioned that to me more than once.
It's all good. I mention it to everybody because I'm a bayou girl, not a city girl.
Gotcha.
So it's important. Don't put me in the city. I'm in the country.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. Well, I remember when you took us out there.
That's right.
And then we'll hopefully get into that too.
I hope so.
So, Colette, super thrilled that you're here.
Yes.
And exciting, interesting, very curious to start by letting people know a little bit about what you're up to in the world these days.
These days, well, I'm here in Boston because I get to speak about what I've been speaking about, which is climate justice, equity, ecological equity. And part of the work really is making sure that the national and global movement around climate change and climate justice includes voices from the South and the Gulf South, which are often left out. My other big job is just making sure that Black folks and Native folks and brown folks know that this climate fight is our fight. It's our fight to win. It's our fight to lead. And in between there's some legal work and some programming and grant writing and such. But the work is really helping to awaken and help to guide my people into a place of liberation just in time for us to help make this world okay, because we're in trouble.
We are in trouble.
Yeah.
We are in trouble. And that's a big reason why I wanted to speak to you specifically.
Yeah.
Before we started recording, I was mentioning this idea of a choice point for the species, right? Are we going to crash or are we going to leap? You know, an evolutionary choice point, and I feel like you're tending to it directly.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are not enough people who understand we're at that point. Something drastic has to happen. But, you know, I'm one of those people who, maybe I'm naive, but I believe in the best in humans. And I think it'll be a hard choice, but I think we'll choose to leap. At least I hope we will.
I think that there's a good chance. I think that there's a chance. I think that there's a chance. And one of the things I wanted to honor you for right away is in the interactions I've had with you, and particularly the ones in your community or, you know, in Louisiana, it seems to me like you spend a good amount of time with what we call real people.
Yes.
And what I mean by that in this context is, I think it's very easy in this advocacy world, in this law and policy world, in this nonprofit game, to stay in conversation with the quote unquote professionals, right? The people that get paid to do this. Like before we know it, we're spending all of our time talking to each other.
Right.
Instead of in community with the people that we are partnering with or that we're supposedly standing up for.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that commitment.
Yeah, you know, I didn't realize it was a thing because what I'm doing is what I've culturally been trained to do, which is sit with people, talk with people, be in community, understand that no matter what I achieve, I'm not any better than anyone. And no matter where I come from and the challenges we face, I'm not any less than anyone. Which means if you just take a look around, we're all the same. And I think necessarily that means, therefore, we have to be together. Part of the work that I do is really just remembering the culture that my grandparents taught me, that my mom taught me, which is, you know, you don't get to the answer by asking a series of questions. Sometimes you get to the answer by sitting and listening to the birds and letting people get to a certain space and comfort and their own conclusion about how safe you are to confide in. You can't rush that stuff. You've got to sit down. You've got to eat dinner. You've got to laugh. You got to share some of yourself. And then people will trust you. They'll talk to you. Not because you're doing a report, but because they understand that you understand. We're all in it together. So, you know, I think a lot of the work that I do is really special. And I've come to really view it as just a really sacred job. And I have to say, you know, I'm in this work with a lot of people who study climate change or get a degree in organizing or something, nonprofit management. And then there are those of us who are in the work because our communities were destroyed. The thing that made us who we are was taken out by a climate disaster. It's a very different approach to the issue. At no point have I had trouble talking with my Republican neighbors or talking with my Baptist friends, or I mean, these are the people in my community, and we all got hit. We're gonna all have to get out of this one together. And I think the approach feels strange to folks who learn to look for themselves. And I've just learned to look for my community, and I know that it's a diverse community.
That is beautiful and helpful, and I have seen that at work too. I have experienced you as a very culturally grounded individual, right? Certainly a clear advocate, right, for communities of color, right, for people of color. But I've also seen the way you connect with other people in Louisiana, right? Who might not, like you said, might not fit your faith or your party affiliation or
Right.
any of these descriptors that we just used,
Right.
then where does that come from?
A little bit of it comes from growing up in the South. I grew up in a completely connected Creole community. Everyone in my community knew whose I was and who I was. And that was a really safe place for me to always go back to. But I went to schools in very white areas, or mostly white schools. So I had to learn really, really early how to sit and be and find myself and find my power in places where there were very few people like me. Mm-hmm. And I have a particular personality that's really just looking for friends of any color. I've had a racial assessment probably way too early in life just because of my circumstances, but the ability to sit with lots of different people because that was my reality. I was one of those Black kids in honors classes or AP classes, and when you're that kid, you know you're going to be the only one in like 6 of your 7 classes. Your PE class, you won't be the only Black person, but in your honors classes, you'll be the only Black person. How do you sit in that space and learn? Mm-hmm. How do you sit in that space and be curious? How do you defend yourself? How do you protect yourself? And how do you make friends when you come from a social and connected culture? You have to figure all that out. And it wasn't hard for me. And I realize that is a gift because I see that it's difficult for some people. And then I just come from a really social culture. I mean, really social. You got to talk to whoever's next to you. You got to laugh about something real quick. You have to offer a compliment or gratitude always. And stay humble in the fact that, you are divine and so are they.
Yes. I want to ask you next, I'll share a thought, but I want to ask you next about just a little bit more about this Creole upbringing, right? Like you mentioned earlier, what you learned from your grandparents and grandparents. Like, what is that cultural milieu like? Mm-hmm. Like, what are some of the scriptures? I do want to share, and I know it's Slidell and not New Orleans, right? But there's a Cuban poet, I'm forgetting the name. The Cuban poet said, New Orleans is not a southern city. New Orleans is the northernmost Caribbean city.
That's right. That's right.
And being Puerto Rican, being from the Caribbean, and just this whole idea of the Caribbean as a imaginary space that starts in like Salvador Bahia, right? Mm-hmm. Moving all the way to New Orleans, mm-hmm. right? And when you describe that, the closeness that you talk to people, that you say thank you, yes. you connect, it's something very familiar mm-hmm. to me, right? It's mm-hmm. like, and you can see how that can give people strength, yes. even in the middle of hardship.
Yes.
And what are other descriptors that you would use to define this cultural mm-hmm. milieu in which you were cooked?
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is that I'll offer the description, but I will mention it has a political meaning as well, right? So to be Creole was politically to not be Black or white, mm-hmm. to be a third race or a race in the middle. And, this is being established in a time of white domination and the erasure of Blackness. So there's pain in this culture, but there's also power in it. And I think a lot of the power comes from, it was a lot of freedom. I had a lot of freedom growing up. I grew up around a lot of bayous, a lot of trees, a lot of land, a lot of animals and wild things and crawly things and smelly things. And I learned really early on that I was part of a broader ecosystem. I was not above the smallest things. nor was I less than bigger things. And I remember my grandfather is a very big impact in my life and in my heart. And I remember sitting with him often in quiet. Another piece that would happen from the quiet is the rest of my family is very large. My mom has 12 brothers and sisters. My dad has 11 brothers and sisters. And there's singing all the time, singing everywhere, singing and a mixture of voices and harmonies and randomly. I'm talking like getting laundry out the washing machine, they're singing. Walking in the backyard, they're singing. Sitting, they're singing. There's also a lot of good food. You know, we are water people, so everything out of the water was fair game. So we didn't learn seasons by snow on the ground. We learned seasons by which seafood was in season, right? So is it shrimp season? Is it crawfish season? Is it crab season? That told us where we were on the calendar, as opposed to cold and hot, which, you know, we just have hot, really. There's also many generations everywhere all the time. So it was never the kids over here or the kids in a house or, you know, or the kids alone. It was grandmother, daughter, and child always in the same spaces. I was one of those kids who liked to be around my mom. And my mom is the oldest girl. My mom is the keeper of our language in our community. And I got to hear the conversation of the old people and my mom. So I'm one of the only people in my generation who's been able to like experience the old people speak in our old language that will die in my lifetime. We'll lose our language. But it was such precious memories now, you know, to be in that room. But it's because the generational divide didn't exist. Everybody was together. Everybody was together. I saw all of my cousins and all of my aunts every day. Every day. All of my best friends were my cousins. You know, we did everything together. You mourn together. You celebrate together. You heal together. So, you know, time alone is precious, but rare. So then you have to learn how to be with people. You have to learn how to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Someone's right next to you. You still have to feel something, you know. You have to learn how to be powerful. Someone's right next to you. You have to balance that. You can't just overpower people all the time. You know, you learn these things because you're moving in community at all phases. And I think that has helped me. And I never thought any of this would be more important than a law degree or, you know, all of these other things that we're taught to go get. But like clearly my culture has been more of a benefit to me than anything I've learned in any book.
You transmit it. You transmit the passion and care for it. And even when you're speaking now, but every time I'm around you, it's such a part of you in a lovely, lovely way. I want to ask you, well, I'm really curious about this language of your people that will die. I mean, it sounds, what can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So our language, the short version of our language is it's called Louisiana Creole. And I have to admit, there are actually several versions of Louisiana Creole. Where we live, it's French, Spanish, Choctaw, English. It's all mixed together, sort of like a patois. If you're from that area, you can understand it. If you're not from that area, you might pick up a word or so. And my grandfather was the last original speaker in our family. My grandfather and my grandmother. So they grew up speaking Creole French. They did not grow up speaking English. But when my grandfather went to school, he would be beaten every time he spoke his language. It was a way for the colonizers, which were oftentimes the churches, to get the Creole kids, the native kids, to stop speaking their native language and to shift into the colonized language, which was English. So my grandfather's experience was, if you speak this language, if you hold this language, you'll get beat. So he didn't really transmit it to his children. They didn't transmit it to their children. Now, you have to understand, my mom's growing up and all of her brothers and sisters are growing up. So the adults are speaking this language, but they didn't purposely transmit it to the children. So they know it, but they don't really use it laterally. They will use it to speak to the elders, but not necessarily to speak to their, their colleagues, their friends, their cousins. So, but there's a special place when you're the oldest girl. So the oldest girl in a lot of families did a lot of motherly, matronly, home-rooted things. So my mom was in a lot of places where people, older people were. And my mom is also, I think, a natural linguist. She speaks like 5 languages. She's amazing. But I think she has her affinity for language because she grew up hearing different languages and having to go between them. So fast forward into my mother's adult years, she's a teacher. She was one of the lead organizers and teachers to help get French back in the schools of Louisiana. It was a really big deal. I was a kid. And I remember the Cajuns and the Creoles were fighting to get French back in the schools because they wanted people to connect more to their French culture. So that was a win because it got French back, but it wasn't the cultural French. It wasn't our Creole French, right? So there's some of us who speak French, but it's not quite our cultural language.
Got it.
My mom is in her 70s. She is one of the last speakers in our community, which has been where it is since the 1770s. We were where we are before America took the Louisiana Purchase. And my mom is one of the last speakers of our original language. When her generation moves on, none of us remaining will hold our original language. We may hold audio of it or some sort of picture of it, but none of us have it. None of us learned it.
Right.
As children.
Yeah.
And the hardest part about it is exactly what's happening to our land. So the language is slowly going away, and our land is slowly going away to sea level rise at the same time. So when I think about 100 years from now, neither my land where we grew up or the language that my people spoke will be in existence in the universe anywhere.
Wow. That's devastating.
It's devastating.
It's devastating.
It's devastating. It is a place of deep devastation. And you realize you'll be gone in all of the sense of that.
Thank you for making that connection and heightening that awareness. I go back to a couple of thoughts that came up, which is, it's interesting language, right? It was violently taken from native folk, right? When migrants come, it's treated like a tool of fear. I mean, the big, tragically funny thing here is, I remember almost 20 years ago, a huge campaign to get rid of bilingual education in Massachusetts, right? A victorious one. And while now the best school systems are two-way bilingual in the suburbs, right? It's like, there must be like an intuitive understanding of language holding power.
Yes.
Right? And holding cultural power. And so there is that act of violence comes with a powerful intention, right?
That's right.
It's I remember one of my favorite TED Talks is by a guy called Wade Davis, and he talks about the decline of the ethnosphere. We talk about the decline of the ecosphere, and so that connection that you made was in my head as you made it. How then? So you have this love,
yes,
right, and you have this connection, and you have these ways, and somehow something happens that turns you into this. don't know if I should call you defender or advocate. Those words seem so, they don't seem to capture enough, but you devote your life, right, to bringing people together so that we can be more free.
That's right.
It was funny because my son was like, so who's coming? What did she do? I'm like, well, she helps people become free.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
How did that happen?
I think of myself like that too, right? So I had this relatively privileged rural childhood that allowed me to find who I was, be who I was. My dad was like 6'6" football player. Like I'm just, I'm a big girl. I'm a deep voice. I'm loud. I come from loudness. And I could have ended up in a place that made me small. But I grew up in a place that allowed me to be as big as I wanted to be, and go as far as I wanted to go. So I left Louisiana after high school to go to college in Ohio. I lived in Africa after college. I went to law school back in Louisiana after Africa. And, I thought I had it all figured out. I mean, I really did. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a lawyer. I want to fight for justice, all these things. So you figure out what that really means when you're in your late 20s. And what happened was Katrina. Mm-hmm. So for all that I thought I had figured out, and all the experiences I had had up until that point, I didn't understand what the universe needed me to be until that moment. And in that moment, I felt a deep calling to, I was struggling with my purpose up until that point. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew my goal, but I didn't really know my purpose until Katrina. And I was like, my community is wiped out. The first thing we had to do was find everybody. The next thing, when you go and engage in finding everybody, is you realize where people are, how far they've scattered, how far away people are. And then you ask them how they're doing. That's the first question you ask where I come from. How are you? They're not well, far away from each other. They are not well. They're not as strong. They're sick. They're scared. They're unfamiliar. They are weakened. Together, we're really strong. We're okay. We're courageous. But we're spread out. So you see everyone in a weakened state. And you see your community in a weakened state, and you try to figure out how to bring it all back together again. So when you try to bring it all back together again, you realize that there are laws and policies and actors and decision makers who don't see you or your community as anything worth saving or helping. And it's a devastating moment when you've achieved so much. I achieved so much in this society. We do the thing. You're on honor roll. You get a scholarship. You go here. You get a fellowship. You're in the newspaper. All of these things, they mean nothing. They mean nothing when you get your individual accolades if you can't be of service to bringing your community back together after something like Katrina. And I had nothing. I didn't have the right tools. I didn't have the right connections. I didn't have the right knowledge. I couldn't help my own people. And I was the one people invested in. I got to go far away. My community helped me go large. They helped me go big. And I came back and I just realized how little I could do. It was a commitment to learn how to do more, a commitment to learn how to do better, a commitment to get my people back to a place of strength. That storm was awful. It was part of a very active hurricane season. So it wasn't just one storm for us. It was several storms. And years of trash and rebuilding. And 5 years after Katrina was BP.
Yeah.
And the BP oil drilling disaster was when the light went on. I was just like, what is happening? This is what is happening right now, what is happening to us. This is going to take us out. This is going to take out the whole coast. That is when I understood our connection to the climate crisis. We are at the forefront of extractive economies, not just the extractive industries that accelerate the climate consequences that look like storms. We are in the place where Black bodies were extracted and brought and sold on the selling block. We are in the place where nature is being extracted for the benefit of multinational corporations, not for the local communities that are on that land and of that land. We are in a place where people are extracted from communities and put in jails so that jails can make money on the NASDAQ. That's where I live. I live in the zone of extraction. And I needed to figure out how do you dismantle not just racism, not just structural racism, but how do you dismantle this philosophy of extraction? And that was where the light of the climate crisis, and then understanding the root of that crisis, is where and how I got to where I am today. So a lot of what I think in my work is, how do we turn whatever the situation is into one that makes the community stronger, shifts from extraction to regeneration, and allows us to all be sustainable in our most powerful grouping. And for me, it's a grouping. I don't really know how to think as an individual. I wasn't really taught like that. I know to play like that, but I don't really think like that. And so that was the light switch. And then 10 years after Katrina in 2014, so let me back up. So from 2010 to 2014, I started working throughout all 5 Gulf South states in communities that looked just like mine, and helped to engage people in developing our own vision for what we wanted to do and what we wanted to see. What do we need in order for us to come back together and be stronger? We developed a strategic process called Gulf South Rising in 2015, and that was the 10-year anniversary of Katrina. And 10 years later, Gibrán, 10 years later, was one of the first times the community was actually asked and heard and listened to and followed. And when we asked, what do you want to do 10 years after Katrina, the community overwhelmingly said, we need to heal.
Wow.
We have not done the work to heal from this really horrible thing that hit us. And it hit us so hard because so many years of oppression and extraction and discrimination and hate they got us to a weakened state as a broader community. So we're going to have to heal from this if we have any desire to survive going forward. Now, I'm a lawyer, so healing wasn't really at the top of my priority list. I was like, y'all sure y'all don't want to do like legislation, or you don't want to do like a case, against somebody? They didn't. They didn't have any interest in that, and they were right. And from that point, I've really been thinking about the role of healing while we make these shifts and pull more people in, understanding the trauma that we all bring, but understanding that if we don't heal that trauma, all the solutions we make will be rooted in trauma. So, the work now is changing myself, helping my community to want to change themselves, and thinking about what value we really have in this community and what it's going to mean if we're not here anymore.
Wow. That is a big significance.
It's big.
I appreciate the way you hold it. I'm curious as to what this healing looks like, right? I will share that, when I think about an evolutionary leap, right? It has many attributes, but the attribute that comes to the forefront for me is this one in which we are able to imagine ourselves beyond the kind of atomized individual. Professor John Powell, I always come back to this, he calls it the European Enlightenment project of the isolated self. right?
Yes, John Powell. Yes. Leave it to John Powell to put it. Yes,
Right.
John Powell. Yes.
I mean, it really, right? Like,
No,
you
it's true.
just, and so you keep referring back to coming from community, just thinking of yourself as community,
Yes.
right? To rebuilding community, right? And so all of it is about thinking beyond this isolated individual.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Okay.
How does the healing happen in this context?
You know, healing is one of those things where I had to do a lot of learning because I used to think of healing as like, you know, an outward prescription to my own problem, like an individual problem, right? I've got to heal my knee. It hurts. I got to go get this thing from over here, put it on my knee, and then it won't hurt anymore. I've had to learn to understand healing in a much broader sense. And it's rooted in culture, actually. When the community at Katrina 10 said they wanted to heal, I asked them, okay, you know, after I pushed back a little bit and didn't win, you know, what does that look like? And the answer was drumming, dancing, song, prayer, calling in sacred to be with us and to guide us. And there's real humility in that. Like you have to trust stuff you can't write down on paper. Like you don't really know, okay, at 6:00, we need to start the drumming. That's not how that works. It just absolutely does not work like that. There's energy that has to be garnered. It has to connect. There is a moment and you feel it. It's not on an agenda. The drumming starts and you may have an idea of who's going to start and who's going to, who we're following, but everything in between is up to the universe. And if you trust in the energy and the spirit that you have called in, if you trust in something greater than yourself, if you let yourself go for one moment, you can feel a bigger power. It is a power of a community for sure, but it's a power of like time and space. It's like a power of history. It's a power of future. And it's almost like everything is right here, right now. So some of the healing that I have been able to witness reminded me of what I saw when I was in Africa. And some of the healing that we've been able to facilitate has brought in African and Native American or North American indigenous tradition. And where we've been able to come in, the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy really tries to bring peoples together, communities together to restore what was destroyed by a colonizing moment and a colonizing spirit. What would happen if African and North American indigenous people just said hello to each other? What would that look like? And we can't actually get to hello until we get to I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot that has happened with both of our communities that we have to atone for. And that atonement doesn't have to be guilt. Mm-hmm. It just has to be accountability. Mm-hmm. Guilt, it just holds you. You can't move out of guilt. It's spinning in mud and you feel really bad. Accountability is something very different. It requires you to almost conjure strength. I understand who I am and how I got here, and I have to be accountable to what that did to you and your people. And I am willing to figure out how we go forward together is a part of that accountability. And you see that and then we say hello. Then you say hello. And hello in South Louisiana is food. You know, it's laughter. It's being with each other. And then from there, the healing really has to come with deep communication around what's happening to us.
Yeah.
And then when the Native members hear that the Black people are experiencing the exact same thing that they're experiencing, now we're becoming one community. Because I can see that the system that's oppressing me is the system that's oppressing you. Sounds a little different, looks a little different, but it's the same system pretty much down the line. And the healing for me, I think, has to begin with the original sins of this country.
Yeah.
Which are what we have done to the indigenous people of North America and what we have done to the indigenous people of Africa.
That's right.
And brought them here. And that has been a priority of healing for our work. How do we bring these groups of people together? Not to be best friends, just to be accountable and to see themselves as part of a greater Gulf South community. And then I think the final piece of that healing is actually awakening people's power. Now that's the part I like. Because there's a moment as a Black girl where you walk through life and you feel your Blackness every day, and you know that most of the world doesn't think that you're beautiful or worthy. But there's one moment in your life where somebody you don't know, in a very loving, non-threatening way, just sees your beauty. And it's like this beautiful one, like, oh, they're like, oh my gosh, you're so pretty. And you're like, thank you. Or you're really smart, or just something really honest that acknowledges they can see your power or your light or your goodness or your value. And that's what we try to facilitate. Individual leaders in these communities seeing their own power and understanding that if I see my power and you see your power and we're working together, this is some powerful stuff.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? Now we got some power working here. We're not moving from guilt. We're moving from accountability. We're not moving from hopelessness. We're moving from what we know is the longest standing powers of people on the planet.
That's right.
Right? We move from what we know is greater than resiliency.
Yes.
It is absolute survival. That's our people.
Yes.
Our people have survived what nobody could survive.
That's right.
So that moment that's what I like. That's the part that makes the work worthwhile. Because I think we can win. But I think winning against this climate crisis is going to require us to heal in all of the dimensions of healing, and then to come into our own power in a really humble but appreciative way.
Wow. Well, Colette, I mean, I've obviously known we've had care and resonance for each other, but this is, I mean, we're really talking about the heart of it. This is what I'm most passionate about too. And one of the things that came to me as you were speaking is like, okay, so the way we do healing is the way we have always done healing.
Absolutely.
Right? Like,
Absolutely.
The way we have always done it. And remembering and holding that and moving it forward, and it seems so evident. And yet, at the same time, it feels so courageous to do what works. It's really weird because it's not something that kind of funding structures like to understand or get behind, right? It's so hard to measure the real authentic power that is nurtured in that.
That's right.
And what becomes possible from there. I wanted to ask you, and this is more really thinking more about, it shows up in the podcast because it's something I wrestle with a lot as a facilitator. So you spoke about healing, you spoke about trauma. One of the things I'm wrestling with and just talking to people about and trying to improve upon is that this trauma discourse is actually at this stage seems relatively well developed, right? If there seems to be a conversation about trauma, a conversation about personal trauma, about communal trauma, generational trauma, like it's out front in a way that I think is a net positive. I think is a plus.
Okay.
And I'm also witnessing the way it kind of comes into social space, comes into facilitated space in ways that almost seem to hijack a process. and what the way I describe it is, it seems like some of us are more ready to rock our trauma, right, than to work through it, right? And as somebody that, because I know, right, I know how I've seen the way your heart softens or even breaks, right, in face of somebody else's pain. I've witnessed that in you. I'm wondering how you balance that. How do you invite people into a transformational space, a healing space, a space that acknowledges trauma?
Yeah.
While tending to that temptation of like rocking the victim card, or, does that come up for you? How do you deal with that?
Oh, all the time. It's probably the most frustrating piece of the work, to be honest. And, I have to say, I think about it and I wonder where it comes from. I think it's a product of the nonprofit industrial complex. I think that the funding, the resources, the lexicon, the new way of being is rooted in who's the latest victim and what's the latest way that white allies or wealthy allies can show they are not the people who would, ever do something bad. It's sort of like, it's not, it's guilt. It's a product of guilt. This is what guilt gets us, which is different from power, what power gets us. So I, in my work, experience many people who have levels of trauma that I can't help or heal. And I've had to try to embody what it means to be inclusive when folks like that are in the room. I have to hold a room of 30 people, and then there's this one person who's just, they need it to go a different way. So we've actually developed processes to attend to the person, but allow the broader space to advance at the same time. Like, what does it look like to have healers in the room so that the person who needs the attention can get the attention over here on the side in the other room where the door is closed and they are safe and they can feel nurtured, versus taking over the space. We also do healing like the day before a meeting, especially with people of color outside of our white allies. So oftentimes we'll have only POC space or only Black space. And, people get real nervous about that. And funders get very nervous about that. And, I just defend it. Like, listen, you don't get to have our trauma too. And also to the Black people, the people of color, we have to deal with this before we go into the meeting. It's not helpful. And I can hit a particular tone where I think folks know I'm not here to play. This climate crisis is taking us out. I'm not in this work because it's an interesting PhD project. I'm in it because it's going to take out my community and wipe us off the planet. So we have to be serious. It doesn't mean we can't tend to our trauma. It just means this middle space is not the place for you to take over. And we have to make a process for people who cannot control their trauma, but for people who try to manipulate that, who try to rock it a little bit, I try to think of facilitative ways to give them the attention and power they're seeking and acknowledgement they're seeking, but also to try to figure out how to leverage that back into the whole,
That's
right?
great.
So, we can't throw people away, Gibrán.
No way.
We can't. That's the problem. That's what's happening in the first place. We do have to sometimes repurpose people, right? I was the girl. I was the one who talked too much. I was the one who was way too loud, laughed too much. I was that person. People help to focus me.
Right.
Listen, Colette, if you're going to talk, then you need to help get the room together, pull it. There's a job for you. There's a place for you and your skills. It's not in the quiet space, by the way. You belong over here in the other space. But then I try to talk to people. I've had many one-on-one conversations, especially with Black women who are experiencing deep trauma and come into a space in destructive ways. And I have real conversations, Gibrán, straight up, like, listen, sister.
Right.
We're going to have to make space to handle this because we need you in the broader space, but you can't keep disrupting. Yeah. And that's my job, right? This is what leadership is. Leadership isn't actually standing out in front, being on a microphone. Leadership is figuring out how all the team plays on the team.
Right.
And sometimes, my coach used to have to do that to me, take me on the side. Listen, this is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to show up like this in the game.
Right.
There's this one woman that comes to mind in particular, and she her trauma was deep. She had every reason to be mad, and she had every reason to be who she was. Mm-hmm. Every reason. And she was alone. Mm-hmm. And so, what does it take to take an hour out of my day to take a walk? Plus, I need to walk anyway, right? My other friends are telling me I need to get more exercise. This woman is alone. Let's go walk together.
Beautiful.
I can help my trauma. This is how my trauma shows up, right? And this is how hers shows up. How do we acknowledge and heal together?
That's so beautiful. Yeah. That's great. Thank you for that. That's helpful. No, and it resonates deeply. I often come back to this idea. People need to heal.
That's right.
And we need spaces for healing, yes. Right? And we also need spaces to do this thing that we got to do.
That's right. Right? That's right.
And so somehow making some distinction while still bringing in the fullness of the human, I think really matters. Mm-hmm. As I hear you, and I've had the privilege of noticing your own growth and development over the years, and your centering. So you are here at the end of days, right? And most of us are choosing to ignore them, and you are choosing to face them. Yeah. And for you, it's a bit more obvious because it's the water's coming up right there, right? I mean, you've taken us to the bayou. You've shown us where the water's rising. How do you tend to yourself? How do you cultivate the centeredness, the open-heartedness, the force of presence that you bring into any space I see you in?
I need to do a lot more. It's the first thing. I love people. Mm-hmm. I love people. I sometimes come back from a place that is hard or was extractive on me. And, I have to go sit at my family's house. I got to go talk to my little cousins. I have a massive family, massive. Really, I could throw a rock and somebody's related to me. But I have to just go sit sometimes. Mm-hmm. I have to go sit and be around people, realize that people are living, right? I'm choosing to face this thing, but, life goes on. Mm-hmm. And life is beautiful. And I have to be around people and be around human energy to do that a lot of times. I love to laugh. Laughter is my cure, for sure. So I watch a lot of stand-up.
Nice.
I try my own stand-up routines in the kitchen. One day I'm going to just lay one out. So I think I can have people rolling on the ground.
I can't wait. I have not seen this part. I need to see it.
I'm pretty sure I can pull it off. And laughter for me is it just reminds me of sounds that I love and moments that I love, and it just brings love back into my being from the inside out. And I have a lot of so my friends who know me know that I'm I'm like a fish, but I'm not any fish. I'm not actually a fish. I'm a mammal. But I will deep dive sometimes to the point where people are like, where's Colette? I'll just stop answering the phone. I'll stop answering everybody. I will check all the way out. I've come to understand that some animals do that, right? There are moments for deep dives in deep, 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 dark ocean. And who knows what's happening down there? You can't even see what's happening down there. I can feel myself do that sometimes. I'll take deep dives. And my friends who know and love me, my family, they know I do that. And they know I come back up to the surface. They know I come back up, I jump around, like a dolphin or a whale or something. But there are moments where you won't see me at all. And those are moments where I feel like I'm healing myself. I feel like I'm healing my heart, my mind. I mean, this is pretty devastating stuff every day. I have to talk about sea level rise, relocation, climate change, climate disaster, death, health. I mean, this is like every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I need to not hear or say anything. I need to be in like complete silence, like a deep, deep, deep water silence. I used to fight it. Now I don't. Now I just let people who love me, and let people who struggle with it. But that's what I do. And I travel a lot. I love trees and I love water. Wherever I go, I try to make an offering to whatever water I'm near.
Wow.
Yeah. I saw your water today with ice on it. I was like, whoa, look at this ice on the water. Let me go say hello. The water has something for me. So I honor the water where I go. And sometimes I feel some healing, some energy come into me to keep going.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is so moving.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, you will go around blessing the water. Of course, you would.
Of course. I'm a water girl. Come on.
So powerful. Thank you for that. I feel it. I'm looking at the time, which feels so limited now. I have two questions that I like to ask as I wrap these things up. So the first one is, right, if you take yourself, you do a little time traveling. I'm into this Octavia Butler. You do a little time traveling and you leap ahead to 10 years, right? And you don't even have to tell me what's happening, right? But you're there 10 years from now, and you're breathing, living a certain way. There's some things you've been able to achieve, some things you've been able to master. You've taken some hits, learned some big lessons, like happens in any given decade
Yes.
of our lives. So that has happened. Do you have something in your mind? So if you could time travel back from that place, right, and give yourself advice, right? What would you say to Colette right now?
I would say be intentional about reaching out to the children in my life. I don't have any biological children, so I have like all of my friends' children that I like to borrow sometimes. But they are mine in certain ways. And I would tell myself to be really intentional about pulling those children into my work, the children that have been placed into my life in whatever reason, to pull them in. They need to know this information. They need to know this work. They need to know this way of being. I would tell myself to, it's time to make big shifts around my consumption. To begin to truly practice everything that I preach. So really just make a decision now to shift your consumption. It'll take 10 years to switch it, but make a decision. No plastic, no waste, no mass production, get out of that. Stop contributing to the thing that's destroying and erasing us.
Wow.
And I would tell myself, to have a little more fun. Have a little more fun. I'm like a music person. I'm like a DJ in my own mind. I'm a comedian and a DJ. This is what I'm going to do in my next life.
This is where you're going to be in 10 years.
I'll be like, running the DJ crew and having everybody come party. But like, really it is, I love music in a way. I love and need sound in a way that most people need words, like books and things written. And, being Black in this country, I really suppressed that. I didn't, it's really deep, old trauma, but just watching how this society treats Black people, like we can only entertain you. We can only be the fabulous diva that's entertaining you. We can only be the musician. We can only be the band. We can only be the show.
Yeah.
I understood that very early, and I suppressed a lot of my own music and my own creativity because I wanted to prove that we were so much more than that. It was really like a frustrated place of like, I can show you that I'm more than that. And now I'm tired of proving things to people who don't care to have things proved to them. No one's listening. So it doesn't matter. What matters is am I experiencing the happiness that I can control as much as I can. And music makes me so happy. It makes me so happy. Why not experience that? So I would just tell myself to, lean into the happiness, lean into the music, pull it back in. And it has a place, if nothing else, to help me stay in the game a lot longer.
That is that is resonating very deeply. I can show you my goosebump test over here. It's real. It's happening. It's touching me.
Yeah.
So much there. So much there. And I just want to say, feeling directly called and challenged in the consumption tip. Really super aware of how we, this family, this household, is contributing to that, and the kind of addiction to things is so weird. And to take that challenge on. And the other one that comes to mind, I have one last question for you, but it's when you talk about children. I went to one of these powerful climate presentations, and it was by the group called Movement Generation. Beautiful work, no? And it was apocalyptic. And I came back and I said, maybe I shouldn't have kids, Not just because the world's going to hell, but because maybe I can just give all my energy to saving the earth, And I called my mom. And I was telling her that I was having this thought. And my mom is a very conscious mother, like very wise, respectful, will listen to you, right? At no other point since I was a little kid was she shutting it down, right? Like she was not having this, right? Like it was like, and it wasn't just like I must be a grandmother talking, but she said we need flowers in the desert.
Ashe. I do.
And those children are blessed to have you, and to have your intentional care, your intentional nurturing, your intentional passing this on. It really comes down to that.
So real. I've had a lot of conversations with women who are not having children, most of us in the climate fight, and there's a real conversation there about what this next generation is going to face. I mean, this is about to be really bad. Yeah. This is a conversation I have with a lot of my friends. Like, I know you got your children learning robotics and such, and that's good. They also need to learn how to grow their own food. This is about to be bad.
That's right.
And I agree with your mother. Like, children are children, but they are a particular energy in this universe that we need. If we lose that, we lose a bigger piece of this fight.
That's right.
And sometimes children are vessels of something greater. Right. That's what I believe anyway. Yeah. If we don't have them, we can't communicate with that, with that energy. So I'm with your mom. Flowers in the desert. That's real. That's real. And I'm glad you have your beautiful son, and I'm glad my friends have their children. And we gotta take care of them.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And it doesn't mean we all have to have them. It doesn't mean we all have to have 10 like our parents' families did. Yeah. But you know, it's definitely a lens to hold.
That's right.
The last question will feel like completely out of left field, but it's one I'm committed to asking. The power of a woman that I'm in relationship with, and it's in the context of patriarchy. It's in the context of what we are now calling a Me Too moment, right? Which is really just like a denouncing of something that's been going on forever, right? It's not like it's happening now. Right. It's this, and I ask it as somebody that's part of it, right? Like I'm a man in this culture with plenty of sins under my belt, and so that's my question is, what do you say to men who are trying to be better? Like, what advice do you have? What wisdom do you have for us?
To white men, I say, you have to understand you are about to experience discomfort if you choose to be honest. But discomfort is not the end of it. You can and you must work through discomfort of learning that you still have some growing to do. You still have some changes to make. Most of us have had to live in this world and we have to be critiqued every moment of every day about how to be better, how to be different. And it's your turn to receive the critique. But, you know, you don't have to stay in that. You don't have to take that as a personal attack. You can just take it as a challenge to be better. To Black men, I say, a lot of our practices are not our own. We are products of colonization and oppression. And a lot of what we're doing it's not even our tradition to be so disrespectful and so dishonorable. That's not who we are. As African people, that's not who we are. It's not who we should be. So there's some work that is broader than seeing your maleness in the Bible. And it's broader than seeing your maleness in, the kingdoms of Africa. It's so broad that it's really about seeing just your grain of sand self in a broader creation. Like you are not meant to dominate. You're meant to play your role. And that's not domination. So I'm one of those women that can challenge a man without a lot of intimidation. And I like that about myself, but I also sometimes I think men need women to stand them and look them in the eye and just hold steady. And it's not always a lot of words. Sometimes it's just standing still and not moving. Like, your maleness is not about to overpower my femaleness. But look, together, this is some powerful stuff. You don't have to sexualize me. You don't have to oppress me. I don't have to do those things to you. We can actually, we can be on a team together. Look how beautiful this team is with this energy and that energy together. That's real. And sometimes it really is like almost a physical, like standing, a physical presence that I choose to offer. And then I guess to all men, to young boys, I say, you're beautiful. You don't have to, these other things, this patriarchy, that's not why you're beautiful. You know, you're not special because you can dominate or because you are dominating. You're special because you're special. Just like that.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm feeling that deeply. Something I can transmit to that little boy downstairs.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. And you know, I have a twin brother.
Okay.
So my perspective of men is, you know, I've had one next to me the whole time.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And he's a great guy. He doesn't have to dominate. He doesn't, you know, like we're different,
Right.
but we were in the womb together.
Wow.
So we're meant to be together.
What a beautiful. Of course, you would not come into this planet alone.
Right,
Because that's just not how you roll. That's not how
I
you-
come in community. I leave in community.
I am so deeply grateful.
Thank you.
I am moved. I am open. I am better. I've learned some things.
Thank you.
I'm ready to let you go, but I don't know if there's anything that you want to say that you want listeners to know.
I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to us. All of the people you're going to talk to, I think this is what's going to save us. These conversations, visiting each other, and just sharing each other. I think this is the work.
I think this is the work.
Yeah.
It's good to do it with you.
Good to do it with you.
Ashe.
Thank you, Ashe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, babe.